And we're back, friends and folks. Welcome back to the Unity stream. I'm Carol, your host here for the Creator Spotlight, and this is Hassan, which you already know.
Hello. I'm Hassan, co-host as well, community manager at Unity.
Obviously, we told the Creator Spotlight wrapped up for the summer, but we promised some little secret nuggets here and there for you. So we're super excited to be bringing this one. We're going to be hitting up, as you've already seen at the lovely title up there, it's going to be Sable, which I'm really excited about because the game just released and it's getting a lot of hype here. Great Made with Unity game. But before we get to that, just wanted to let you guys know that there's a ton of content coming up in the next couple of months. Namely that tomorrow we're going to be hitting up the Lego Game Jam. For those who don't know, the Lego Ideas, which was super popular, we got over 1,000 of your submissions last time, is coming back full force. You're going to be able to submit another game. This is the Ninjago edition. So if you want to know more about it, definitely come onto the YouTube channel where I'll be hosting a game jam with the Lego peeps. We're going to be giving away tons of Lego minifigures as prizes. And we're going to talk about the prizes that you can get for the Lego Ideas contest. Super excited about that. So make sure you show up. And there's the Humble Bundle Showcase still going on. For those who don't know, we extended the FPS Humble Bundle, so you can go check it out. We'll throw the links in chat so you can still download it. It's a really great value. And we have a showcase, so if you want to submit your game so you have a chance that we'll play it, I'm going to be joined by Minions Art. So it's Joyce over. You'll probably know her. She's also known as the Shader Witch. Creates really great tutorials and content.
So good.
Yeah, awesome. Hassan, what else do we have looking forward to?
Yeah, that wasn't enough.
There's so much more.
We also have the publisher sale going on the asset store at the moment. I personally love this one. If you just cut to my screen, it's the 50% off particle assets. So this is, super useful if you want to juice up your game, make it look just that much better. We have 3 different publishers this time. Usually we'll have like one publisher for a publisher sale, but this time we're bringing 3 together. We have Crypto 289, Arachnor VFX, and Hovel Studios with some incredible assets. Like there's a whole bunch, rain, magic effects, water systems, effects for your guns and muzzles, blood, these packs pretty much cover all the kind of VFX you'd need in your game. And as usual, there's also the free gifts. So these ones are really cool. Let me jump to that. So if you go to this asset giveaway page and put in the coupon code Particle Party and put these into your cart and check out with that code, you'll actually get Realistic Effects Pack 3, Action RPG Effects, and AoE Magic Spells Volume 1 for free. And this is it's just amazing. Go check those out. They're filled with so many effects. I personally couldn't believe they were free. I caught them right away. So so check that out. It's available. The free offer is valid till October 9th. So jump on that. But yeah. So let's jump back to today's show, Carol.
Yeah, so we're going to be checking out Sable. So the great folks, the dynamic duo over from Shedworks. So I see the chat's really already excited because it sounds like a lot of people have already started playing it. For those who don't know, let's cut to the trailer so you can get a little sneak peek.
Didn't know, now you know.
Come in to me, show us the way. I'm kind
And welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Greg and Dan. Why don't you say hello and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Greg.
I'm Daniel.
How's it going? Thanks for having us.
Wish it works.
Thank you. Chat is already super excited. You have people in chat. Uncle Renwhip already said Sable is game of the year for me, and I haven't even finished it yet.
Finish it before you make that decision. Maybe you'll change your mind.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, which each one of you does, and how you made Sable?
You can go first.
Yeah, so I'm Greg. I do mostly design and art side of the game. I guess we all do a little bit of everything, but and so I studied architecture before going into games, so that kind of informs a lot of what I do on the project. And yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, and I'm Daniel. I'm the technical director, I suppose. So I do most of the programming and shader work, and just manage the technical sides of the project.
Nice. I know there's a history behind the name Shedworks because, I mean, I think originally your team was just the two of you, right?
Yeah, we used to work in my parents' shed, literally in their garden. We did that for 5 years, I think. We moved out, so we're no longer in a shed. This isn't the shed. A massive shed. Any building can be a shed if you want it to be, but no, we moved out 2 years ago, just before everyone had to work from home for a long time. So that was really useful. But no, so during the course of the project, we kind of got publisher funding, and that let us expand the team a bit, expand the scope of the project, and that meant eventually we
did not fit in the shed anymore.
Yeah, we
tried for a little bit, but it was getting quite cramped. So
we had 4 of us in shed.
Yeah, there's four people on the team in London here, and then there's a whole bunch of other people all around the world.
How big is the shed exactly?
The shed itself?
It was probably like 2 by
3 meters.
Like 2 by 5.
So it's cozy.
I think you're being generous. Yeah. You're even being generous.
Cozy, definitely.
It was cozy. We had lots of fun critters, spiders, whatever. The spiders kept the flies out, so they were useful. So we allowed them to stay. But and then we had my dog Pip would sit with us and fart in the shed, keep us. That was good fun.
Great ambiance.
Exactly. He's really old and really stinky. So he's like 16 now. He's. And now he looks like my girlfriend.
Chad asks if the spider was on the payroll.
No, but the dog was.
Thanks, Raw Fury.
Paid in treats.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Raw Fury. Is he?
Oh, nice. There you go.
Yeah.
Guys, show us if you get that far or you get to the ending of the game. Definitely show us when you get to Pip's credit. We want to see it on social media and tag Greg.
Do it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what is Sable? How did it start? What's the story behind it for those who don't know?
So Sable is an open world exploration game. Sable is the main character. She's a young girl leaving her home for the first time. She's going on a journey out into the desert. It's a kind of ritual that everyone in her world takes part in when they sort of reach a certain age. So it's a kind of a rite of passage into adulthood. And the idea is that you're going out into the world, you're learning about its history, you're learning sort of how to survive, you're meeting the people that live in the desert, you're learning from them, you're learning skills. Your kind of ultimate goal is to decide which mask you want to wear as an adult. So everyone in the world wears a mask, and the purpose of this ritual is kind of a child sort of trying on different masks and deciding which masks they want to wear into adulthood. So it's about Sable discovering who she wants to be and
discovering the world, I guess.
And
so it's an exploration game at its core. When we started with a really basic kind of Unity store asset that we kind of put together in
a
like
$5 hover car.
Yeah, we put it together in about 2 hours. In fact, I might be able to find it. I posted it on my Twitter recently. We took that to the pub, and it was like it was literally like 2 hours, I think we spent on it. And all you could do was drive around a hover car in this kind of dune environment. And for some reason, people seemed to like kind of grab onto that when we took it to the pub in a way that we hadn't seen before. But we tried pitching that game, and nobody really went for it. So we kind of shelved it for about a year. And it was always just kind of in the back of our heads. We're developing it a bit in our free time, but whilst we're doing contract work. And then a year later, we started sharing GIFs of that. Once we started a little bit more development. And it really blew up on Twitter, I guess. And from that, we managed to get a publishing deal. And
that was in 2017. So winter 2017 is when we started working full time, and so that's been our past 4 years is getting it finished, and it came out this 2 weeks ago.
So this is the original, like at the pub.
Hang on, they can't see your screen.
Ooh, yeah, we can go see your screen there.
If you want to load that up. So this was some off-screen recording someone took at the pub. This is like the original 2 hours, couple of custom textures,
I think the outline effect, that was from the Unity standard assets.
Yeah, it was.
Image effect pack.
I'm pretty sure it's like 2 or 3 combined.
Yeah, just kind of slapping stuff together.
Yeah. And that was the first prototype, like literally 2 hours, took it to the pub on a laptop. And from there, we had some others, but that was it.
Did you do the controller yourself? The physics for the character controller? Like,
that was the $5 hover car asset.
Oh, really?
Just a little hover car. I mean, I have subsequently written the bytecode is I did write myself, but at the time that was our shortcut.
Yeah.
It's just.
I mean, it was just a car. You couldn't get out of it or anything. It wasn't like.
Yeah, so then the game also got traction, at the Tribeca Film Festival. Is like one of the first games that was featured. It's the first time that like narrative. I think that's the thing that caught people's attention. It was the first time that a game could feel more like a story, or is part now an extension of film and things like that. So a lot of eyes on that game. I know a lot of people came to play it at the Tribeca Film Festival. How did that feel to get that additional eyes on it?
That was really cool. That was. We'd been working on it just kind of on our own, not really showing anyone for probably about 3 years at that point, because that was earlier this year.
Yeah, we'd obviously shown the trailer. We had some hype built up, but we kind of got a bit quiet. Like we were showing stuff in drips and drabs, but this was the first time we had people playing it.
Yeah, this was the first time that strangers on the internet got to actually play our game and tell us what they thought.
And then we had the demo loaded up for the week after.
And when you're making a game like this, which is about exploring and kind of uncovering mysteries, obviously there are no mysteries for us. We know where everything is, so it's impossible for us to play it like a player would. So we were just kind of working away on this thing for several years, kind of hoping that the mysteries were going to be interesting or intriguing. It was really nice to finally actually get some people who could actually experience it and enjoy it.
Do you feel like you have to, since it is kind of like an open world, do you feel like you have to spend a lot of time watching other people play the game and play for a long period of time to kind of get that experience of playing it for the first time? Or do you think short 10-minute playthroughs enough to get that feeling?
Oh, you're right. We knew that it was difficult because
sometimes it'll take you 10 minutes even just to drive the bike over to where you're supposed to go. The pace of the game is quite slow.
So the tutorial we designed as a microcosm of the rest of the game. So it's a bit tighter, it's a bit smaller, it's a confined area. There's a much more linear narrative going on, and we're teaching the player about the mechanics as they go through it. But so we knew that was actually kind of a perfect demo as well, because it also sets up the narrative, it introduces the world. It's quite a natural demo to give people. But what that was also provided us early on, and it was the first thing we ended up making. And some people would say make the tutorial last because then you know what's in the game. But the reason it was one of the first things we made was because we had no other way of testing this kind of like exploration model. And so until we had enough content to do so.
Yeah.
So to create this micro version of the game, it meant that we could test that model in this set environment.
It's a bit more controlled. It's not too massive. Because otherwise, if you just build, a bunch of sand dunes and then you plonk the first location down, if you want to go and test, you can test that one location. You can get someone to play it and be like, can you try climbing up this tower and see if it's fun? And that is useful information, but it doesn't tell you anything about how they would play the overall game. When they have the whole desert and they can kind of choose where they want to go and what they want to see.
They would navigate through it.
Yeah, and that kind of feedback, it was basically impossible to get that kind of feedback
until later on.
Really late in, because you do need enough content in the world for someone to feel like it's a populated place and they can really explore it. Because otherwise, we obviously were giving the game to friends and stuff early on, but it does just kind of feel like a bunch of dunes and there's nothing in it. And so took several years before we could really get that kind of quality.
But the demo was quite good because it forced us to like finish some systems that were still like 80% or whatever, and you're like, we just need to like dot some I's, cross some T's, and then you just have to go and do that for a demo. So like sprinting was something we talked about for about 2 years before the demo. And it's like, this is probably like a couple of days of work or whatever, but it's not a priority right now. And then suddenly you're a week before the demo comes out and I'm like, Daniel, it's a priority right now. Let's do it. So that's the sort of thing that came in like literally a week before the demo came out. Sorry to our QA team. But
to rush that out.
But that's the sort of thing that a demo is quite useful for. It forces you to like, okay, we have to actually like make a decision here and do it.
Someone's got to be able to play this.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, why don't we jump into the game? You can give us a little tour of it, and I can ask a ton more questions because chat's very excited about this game.
Let me just get controller, boot this up. I've got Unity loaded in the background, so it might be a bit. Let's see how we go. It should be fun.
Yeah. So we've got a Greg's screen.
I'm also not sharing audio, so.
It's too bad that we're not sharing audio because that's one of the questions.
Let me see if I can do that.
Don't want to mess with the producers.
All right, let's not do that then. Okay.
Maybe we can play. Yeah, I think
Play with fire.
Yeah, I think Twitch might DMCA us anyways if we play any of the music.
All right. I think we're good on that front. We've been assured. It would be funny if we DMCA'd ourselves, but
it has happened on the stream.
It's definitely happened.
It's happened several times on this stream as well, where we got not DMCA'd, but definitely Twitch removed every time that we played footage of the game. It just mutes that whole section.
Right. Okay, I'm just waiting for my controller to connect.
Dan can just hum the background of Japanese
I can just make the I can make the mouth sounds for the bike.
Yeah. So that was the question. Is like people were saying that Sable really feels the way it does because of the involvement of Japanese breakfast and the fact that. So when did that relationship or that partnership come into play? How did you know that? Did you always know you wanted to use her music, or did that come later?
That came really, really early on. So, like I said, we were kind of getting the team together in 2017. That was when we kind of first had a budget. So we were, working out who we wanted to bring on. And that was when her second album had just come out. And it was an amazing album. It was the album that I was just listening to every day at the time. And she had done a little... she made a tiny video game to accompany the album, a kind of little JRPG interpretation of the album.
I love that.
With like MIDI covers of the songs. And I read an interview with her on Polygon, kind of they interviewed her talking about this little game project. And so I knew, oh, cool. So she's clearly up for side projects and she likes games, and her music would be an amazing fit. So I just sent her a message on Twitter. I just sent her a DM, just, hey, we're making this game. We only really had a couple of GIFs at that point, but it was after some of the GIFs had been doing really well, and we'd got some really good sort of attention from them. So we just sent those to her, and she was going on tour at the time. So she was going to be playing a show in London, where we're based. So when she came to London, we went to the pub and we met up, had a chat, talked about our ideas for the project and stuff, and she was really into it. So like I said, that was 2017. That was right at the beginning. So we hadn't even really started. We were still just kind of doing.
Was it the same pub where you showed your prototype off? Seems to be a recurring theme. All important milestones.
No, I don't think it was.
It's true.
Although we did start the company because of a meeting in the pub as well.
Pubs are an important part of.
Important part of British life. So I guess we reflect that. But,
definitely. That was kind of it. And then she was there right from the start. And so when we were kind of developing the different areas for the world, we could sort of show her and Martin Koala, our sound designer. They're our kind of sound team, the two of them. We could show them, sketches and early versions of the different biomes, and so it meant that they could build up the world with us. So it was a pretty organic process, and it took some time. And
I'm aware we might be losing the lines to the I'm going to thicken the lines, which is a new feature we have.
So
that's great.
Wow, yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, so hopefully
nice accessibility features.
Yeah, so that's incoming. That's an exclusive. We haven't shown that yet, but I don't know if Darian's really happy with me. But so we have some new features like that coming.
Awesome. So there you go, chat. If you want a world-renowned artist to do the soundtrack game, just gotta slide into her DMs. So there you go.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Except I think probably her DMs are they're closed now.
Yeah. She was. I think she's exploded as well since. She's gotten a lot. Her profile's gotten a lot bigger since. I'm gonna change the time of day.
Yeah. Well, she did that performance. I think it was at Tribeca, and it was just so amazing. And I had I don't know how they filmed that, but it was like the Sable was in the background. It looked like she was in Sable, and it was like, it was pretty amazing. I think I remember Twitch chat going completely berserk for it.
Yeah. That was a huge amount of work from the video team at Raw Fury, at the publisher. We got sent the spec for this massive LED wraparound screen thing, and we had to put together a footage as if and the screen was on the floor as well, so there were screens behind her and the screen on the floor, and so it looked really cool. They did a really good job there. That was
how your publisher believes in your game. They go into that much effort. I was wondering about some of the inspirations behind the art, and there are some that you refer to often, like a lot of comparisons, and you see that in the chat are made to like the art of Mobius. Are there any other inspirations as well that behind the game?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so many. It's hard to. I kind of feel like I list new ones every single time, just because there's so many. But the obvious ones, in my opinion, are Mobius, of course, but Studio Ghibli, particularly some of the Miyazaki films. Really big
keep playing while you
inspiration. And then what else? I guess a lot of my personal inspiration comes from architecture. So a lot of the architecture, it's inspired by different people for kind of different eras, I guess. But I looked a lot at like Carlo Scarpa for the more like ruined monumental era stuff. I looked a lot at Archigram and the Metabolists for the ships, as well as a lot of anime architecture. So there's a really good, I don't think I have it here, there's a really good anime architecture book that was basically just on my desk the entire time I was developing the game. It's a great reference. There's lots of like Ghost in the Shell. There's a really good Akira book that I think it's just the first volume of Akira, but that was a really great reference. And then as well, just like when Martin and I, the sound designer, we went to, we kind of did a road trip in America after GDC 2019, and we went out to Arcosanti, which was just kind of this desert living experiment.
It's like a commune in Arizona somewhere.
Yeah, and there's lots of like experimental ideas, and it's called like arcology. And
I've got the book of that.
Yeah, I've got a massive book. Here, let me see if I can get this down without knocking the plant off. Oh, and yeah, knocked something off. Yeah, I have this big book here that I picked up when I was there. And yeah, like some of the ideas and references here. Let me see if I can find anything in particular. Well, anyway, yeah, it's just really interesting stuff that, you know, just sketches and ideas. This is hard to show because it's such a big book, but anyway, I do a lot of like studying big books about architecture, and yeah, that's an important part of the process. Who else? Yeah, I mean, in terms of the games, we had a lot of game references, like Shadow of the Colossus was a big one for us. We kind of, obviously, really big fans. That's what we grew up with. But the idea of the relationship between the horse and the player character was like something that we tried to, you know, kind of feed into the game itself with the hover bike with Simoon. And I hope that was successful. But you know, but also the fact that you're traveling around in this quite lonely environment that is quite sparse, but the game still holds up. I think that was essential for us because we knew it was a desert, and we knew that we weren't going to be able to fill it up necessarily. So it had to accommodate that. And I mean, also the boat in Wind Waker as well. I'd say.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
We get a lot of comparisons to Breath of the Wild, and in terms of the gameplay, I think Breath of the Wild is probably our closest fit. Just the sort of freeform nature of it and how much freedom the player has to decide where they go. But yeah, in terms of the visual style, and also just in terms of the kind of the terrain in Breath of the Wild is quite busy. There's a lot of little things to do, whereas our game is a bit more sparse.
We don't have the resources.
Yeah, we don't have the resources to populate it as densely as that. So Wind Waker is a really good reference there, where for us, the dunes, the kind of empty rolling dunes, feel almost like an ocean. That you're sort of driving you're sailing your bike between islands in this ocean of sand. So yeah.
I really like that comparison, actually. So you talk about your background as an architect and how it influences the inspirations behind the game, but I believe it also influenced your process for making the game, right?
Yeah. So let me jump out of the game, and we can start to get into Unity itself. I'll save this just in case we come back, but give this a minute. I don't want to Alt F4 in case I close one of the windows that we have open here by accident. 2 seconds. Got to have a chance to show the logo on stream as well.
Good logo, I mean.
That's marketing 101 for you. Yeah, so actually, I guess, so one of the things that we didn't really show, but was like, in the kind of marketing build-up, was the town, right? And so like a lot of my background is architecture. So Ecria was a town that we kind of developed throughout the course of the game, and I wanted to show my process. So, and I've actually found this video from Procreate. So I draw a lot in Procreate of like some of the planning. This is flipped upside down, but it's architecture. It's just the text is going to be upside down, really. But I want to show a video of this process and how, like, so at the beginning of this is just a recording from every line, every mark I made on the iPad, basically. So I kind of start on paper, on gridded paper, and I kind of develop from there, and just this iterative process, layer upon layer upon layer, kind of figuring out ideas. Like, it's really rough. It's really like ugly drawings, but this is like my top-down plan process for designing a small city, a small town. You can see how I'm like shifting and creating these different axes of movement, so the town doesn't just feel like this gridded linear landscape. And again, this is all being developed on paper first, but then what I do after that, so here I've kind of brought it into Unity, created it from that plan. Like I think I literally just took that texture, exported it, applied it to like a quad, and then like built using Pro Builder.
You've got the Pro Builder scene open here.
I can grab a version of the Pro Builder scene here. I think it's this one. See if we can. Yes, so here we go. So here's.
You can have a run around this.
Yeah. Let me just make sure I'm not loading terrain. I'll skip that. Okay, let's give this a go.
With Sable.
Yeah, I put her there. Yeah. So I'd make a block out and figure out spacing, figure out like what the feel of the space is, and then once I have some information from that, bring it back to the iPad and then do further iterations. And it's kind of this back and forth. And like the thing about designing, I found the thing about designing architecture is like switching medium is actually really helpful, because you get different things from you get one thing from designing in 3D, but it can slow you down if you want to do quick iteration. And you get a different thing when you're designing with paper. And you can, with 3D, you can really zoom in and get granular, but sometimes it can be a bit of a distraction, and sometimes you want to think a bit more about the whole idea. But then when you're on paper, you can really think, it's much harder to think in 3 dimensions, really. So these are all things that moving back and forth between different methods can really help you. And probably if I had more time and resources, I would make like a physical model. I'd love to do that, because you learn so much about structure because it has to stand. So as soon as you, even in 3D in a video game, you can make a cube and it can float, and there's no physics on it. It won't collapse. Whereas if you have to make like a maquette or a 3D model, it can just collapse on you. And so you have to work out solutions for that. Hopefully this loads.
It'll load.
Okay.
The project takes a bit of time to get going.
Yeah, it's a meaty project. But
so when you sketch, do you sketch on iPad, or do you ever bring it to the physical medium and actually sketch on like trace paper with a pen and then scan that in? What's your preference?
I do both.
Nice. Okay.
I started to get more and more into the iPad because a big benefit for the iPad for me is, especially as we brought on more people into the team, is it's really easy to send stuff off really quickly. So a lot of the things that I do later on are just like ideas that God, this is frozen. A lot of the things that I'll do are just okay. I think this. Okay, we're back. We're alive. Right, just about.
Oh, what is this frame rate?
Yeah. So I don't know why the frame. I think this scene is quite heavy, and it might be why we redesigned it.
Someone needs to optimize this game.
Yes.
Want to talk about it?
Yeah, no, let's not. So yeah, this was just the first kind of block out using Pro Builder. You can see I've got just I'm copy and pasting doorways. I'm just getting a sense of like the space, and it's totally different to what we ended up with. Hopefully I can walk you through. I have a feeling these NPCs are what is causing the performance to tank so hard.
Yeah.
These NPCs at some point had behaviors and would walk around, but I haven't loaded this version of the scene in a while. And yeah, this it has some of the same gestures that we use across in the like in-game version. So we have this kind of little doorway that on your left as you come in, and a little opening, and that's to like both invite the player to a different part of the town, but also give the town that sense of density. And we have this kind of main street, which in the actual version I've like elevated and widened to make it feel a bit more like a main street. But here I'm trying to frame that big building structure in the distance as well, give the town this layering effect, so that it feels you can navigate your way through the town by seeing landmarks, which is really important, but also it gives the town this sense of depth and sense of layering that what was really important with this town was to make it feel bigger than it was, to make it feel more than it was, because I think, so I went to the Medina in Marrakesh a bit, as well as Arcosanti, and the thing about those places, they're very like winding and narrow and kind of intricate, and you can really get lost in them, and I wanted this to have that quality. Like, I can really get lost in this place. Even if I know it, I can kind of get lost. And Venice is very much the same as well. Yeah. And so that was a really important part of the design of this place, that each area should have its own distinct spatial quality. So this kind of opens up into like what we call the agora, like the kind of town square space. Yeah, these narrow alleyways. And that was also meant to be reflective of how people live in or built architecture, vernacular architecture in hot environments. So narrow alleyways are really important because they create shade, but they also create wind movement. So, and then you need these bigger squares so that the wind could, like, hot air can kind of escape upwards. So I tried to create using those sorts of patterns. And, they create, like I said, distinct spatial qualities in doing so. So I started to get a sense of, okay, what does this feel like in 3D space? A big part of what I wanted to do with this town as well was to have the rooftops as their own kind of layer, whether the player could access them or just see them. So here you can kind of see them from down here.
You can access them though, you can just climb up the walls.
Yeah, you can, but we weren't sure if you could climb in the town at first. That was sort of a decision we had to make, like, do we want to give the player the freedom to climb these walls, or is that like something we want to tell about a story that like is kind of socially unacceptable to just go around climbing on walls? And we ended up just saying, why not? Like, let's just let the player climb on them. Like, the environment can support that, the level of density we have and stuff.
I like what you say about like that being socially acceptable, because so you're talking about a lot of the layers that an architect would consider when designing, a building or like a landscape or a town, right? But and you talked a lot about like the biomes influence on the architecture, the desert, the heat, how you'd want wind to flow through. But I wonder, did you consider also the culture of the people, and have like maybe if it's a very social culture, they would have a plaza, or like how did that influence how the city is set?
Definitely. I mean, like each area has its own in my mind. So these aren't necessarily always things that are like told to the player in the game, but the idea is that they're expressed somehow. So like, I think in the final game we have doorways that are slightly different in different parts of the town, and like the square ones are meant to be a bit more like, this is a bit of a more rundown part of the town, but then the more intricate ones are meant to be like, okay, this is where people who maybe have a bit more affluence would live. And so like, but also what you say about like, okay, the social culture, like we tried to have like, we have a little cafe in the actual in-game version. It's a really important social space. We have like a docks area where people can hang out, but also the rooftops were really important, because the rooftops in some of the studying that I did in places like in Cyprus, in Marrakesh, so I'm half Cypriot, so that was a big influence on my work. But in these places, sometimes rooftops, particularly in towns, become these semi-public spaces. So they can be shared, they can be like organized in a way that people can meet up there, but they're kind of for locals rather than for any stranger walking through the town. And they kind of overlook the more public streets, but those streets are also like semi-private because they have a lot of shading and little kind of crevices and places that people can end up. And it was something that I tried to like design into the town. It wasn't necessarily always going to make it, because there was a version of this town that was much bigger, but we literally just were like, this is not, I mean, it's pretty not performant as it is, and it was even less so at some point. There were even more, a lot of what we did in the town had to be like cut back. But yeah, this you can see. So this kind of me drawing this purple area, it was like, okay, this is more for like, this is an area for locals, I think, was my thinking. And I think I start to kind of map out different areas as I go. Let me see. Yeah, so purple. So I know that purple was, so this is like a private square, like shared amongst this kind of like residential area. And then we had this private market area down here. This green space was like meant to be the main square. So this was very public. This was a more social space. This was where you might have shops, market stalls for foreigners, for people visiting. And then I'm trying to remember all of this because I probably drew this in like 2018, 2019. Yeah, you can start to see I'm getting more and more detailed. Here I was adding the oasis, and then I split the town up into kind of 2 chunks to try and bring the water into the town, because I knew that in a desert you might build a town on an oasis, but you want to kind of bring that in and bring it in as a functional element as well as a social element.
Yeah, the people live on the water is survival.
Yeah, and we initially had building out in the water, which we took away eventually because it was creating. We need to make the town smaller, basically.
Yeah.
You can see how I'm zoning it. Okay, the blue area is more like the docks. This pink area is like an agora, like a public square, which again we truncated a bit. It's going. But yeah, anyway, here I'm exploring heights. I'll just skip ahead.
You mentioned already having to pare back the town a lot because of optimization and limitations and all that. Does that mean that I don't know if this is the right question to ask, but any thoughts about bringing it to other platforms such as the Switch?
We can't talk about it.
No comment.
Yeah.
We need to get it performing a bit better on PC first.
Yeah. So yeah, here I'm figuring out lots of different things. And then actually I did a version a bit later after I built Blockout, where I was exploring it from a slightly different perspective and trying to draw out the visual language of the town a little bit more and be, again, that sort of, so this underlying element is what I just showed you, the kind of Blockout that I just showed you. And then here I'm just drawing over, okay, we have this kind of, this area where tents would kind of build up because there's like nomadic society, and we wanted to have this kind of in-between element which we called the Sarai in the end, and that area was like people who weren't just passing through, but they weren't living in housing in the town. They were kind of like on the periphery. They were kind of outsiders to the town, to the people living in it, but they were semi-permanent.
They're a bit poorer. They're not sort of fully integrated into town life. Yeah.
Socially, they're kind of seen as pariahs in a sense, but they're there, and they're kind of using their resources to like steal water from the town and stuff like that. We kind of tell that story in the game.
In one of the quests.
Yeah. And yeah, so this is me developing the kind of visual language a little bit, and I don't know where this ends up. I think, yeah, this is all just on the iPad. I'm trying to build these towers up a little bit, which are really important for navigation, like I mentioned before. And yeah, that's kind of my process. Like here's another example that I wanted to show because I think this shows the complete process from start to finish. So this is for the Western Dune cartographer. Yeah. And the idea is that you have these cartographers and you can see them from a distance and climb up to them and buy maps from them. And so this was me designing a level for the Western Dune cartographer. So I start off with this very loose style, this very kind of like, it's really crap drawing, but I'm just getting ideas out onto the page. I'm just building up, doing diagrams, what's the route, and I had this idea, okay, what if you come inside this structure and come back out? That's quite like interesting journey that I want to take the player on. And I thought a lot of interesting opportunities for expressing architecturally different parts of the world as well.
Also, you can tell a story about the tower and like who lived here and what did they use it for and stuff.
Exactly. So I started off with this drawing, and then I kind of built from that. I built this thing here, this block out in 3D, just to get a sense of the space. And then I took it back to the iPad, screenshotted it, did a draw over, and then I started. This is kind of what you see in the game, but here I'm trying to develop the aesthetic a little bit. And then I want to develop the internal environment as well. So I drew this kind of cutaway, and I could get ideas about the route and what was going to happen there, what the scale of the space would feel like. And I think you mentioned a reference, Hassan, that I think what was it called?
The houses with a story.
Houses, yeah. So I think it's very much along those sorts of lines, and that this is kind of what ended up in the game. This was a refinement of the original sketch, but it's not like vastly different. It's just working out details, and planning really, and then taking this and turning it into an environment in the game was, again, using Procreate, using Unity to get the spacing. None of this really was done in Blender or Maya or anything. It was all done in Procreate using existing materials.
And just Pro Builder as well.
Pro Builder. Yeah.
And just for some context,
probably like 80% of our game was built with Pro Builder.
Yeah. You have to do a bit of stripping out Pro Builder stuff.
We have a tool. We have a tool that kind of strips out all the Pro Builder scripts before the game gets built. But yeah,
so built with Pro Builder and then replaced with the final terrain and assets, right? So,
yeah. So if I'm also you can see here on the right, I have my material editor and my vertex colors. So vertex colors, we can get into this later, but are an important part of the shading that we do. Let me see. So if I just create let me try and find myself. This is like the vast nothingness. Okay, let me just create a new shape. So now we've built up our workflow, what I would do is I would just apply a material. So, okay, I want this to look like this wall. I want this to look like a metal grate or whatever. And then I can use and this is all just using Pro Builder. I can then apply my vertex painting and create outlines where originally there aren't any, and really build something up really quickly using this methodology. Again, this is kind of lagging, I think, because we're streaming, but it's not normally this slow. Okay. So you can see if I then want a different material on the roof or something, I can just handle that all in Pro Builder. So if I want roofing tiles with a different vertex paint, you can see now that's now okay, that's kind of, obviously I haven't done any actual editing here, but you can get a sense of how I use Pro Builder to block out a space initially and then develop it. Yeah.
And so for the collisions, are those then replaced with the new assets, or do you maintain, you just turn off the mesh, maintain the collisions, or you just gut out the Pro Builder entirely and replace it with the new asset?
A lot of the time there aren't even new assets. Just Greg's a lot of Greg's original Pro Builder meshes are the actual meshes in the game.
That's amazing.
All that our tool is doing is stripping out the actual Pro Builder components. But the meshes, the majority of the actual meshes, they were just built directly in Unity.
Yeah, and I think some people don't realize that that's totally a viable solution. Like a game, Tunic, I believe the entire game is made fully in Pro Builder, right? They just changed the materials and the textures. So this is another great example that I actually wasn't aware of. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah, it's a combination. We have to do some optimizing sometimes, or combining of, because I think particularly on the material side with some assets.
Yeah, doing UVs in Pro Builder is probably not, I wouldn't recommend that.
No, it really depends how you're doing it. But for some more bespoke things, we wouldn't do that. But here's that environment, the cartographer that I showed you the drawing of. And the majority of this would have been I think Yanis might have taken it and put it in let's have a look. This is still
still a Pro Builder mesh.
Yeah, so this one, I can still edit this now. This is still a Pro Builder mesh. So yeah, it's it's a pretty useful tool. We used it a lot. And what it allowed was figuring out spacing, figuring out iterating really quickly on ideas in really useful ways, but also the vertex painting stuff is so crucial to the style that being able to iterate it in engine. So now if I apply a different vertex so that just this here, you can see how it's going to change. It added this line to the rendering, which is obviously adding lines to the style is a really important part of the style. So that's it really. That's a big part of the process. That's a big part of kind of
I want to get back to the lines later when we dive into the actual shader, but I believe so. Earlier you were talking about creating limitations, like the landscape, the culture, but then you have there's an asset you use that helps you put those limitations in place, correct? Using map magic, I believe, to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I can show you that here. I'll just load this map magic scene that we have.
So map magic is the tool that we use to generate the terrain. The terrain is all procedural. We obviously didn't have the resources to sculpt all of these genes by hand, and even if we did, that would be a poor use of those resources.
Absolute map
magic is great. Map magic is one of my favorites. It's a node graph, similar to things like shader graph or shader forge, where you're generating sort of random noise and then you're applying different parameters to it and feeding it through curves and blending it with different layers, and you can use that to build up.
I think the stream just died.
Oh.
Give us 1 second. I think.
Oh.
Okay. So this is an example of some pinned terrain, right? Where
should we continue or should we hold off till it's back live? Oh no.
I think it's a Twitch hack. That's why. But Mike, cool.
We're back. Okay.
And we're back. Welcome
Amazing.
back.
Okay.
We didn't talk about anything, so you didn't miss much.
We paused. We're back.
We can bring up.
Continue.
So the other thing with editing the terrain for a game like this is the map is really quite big. It's about 10,000 units by 10,000 units, and so you can't load the whole thing in one go. Your editor would just crash. So Map Magic has a really nice system where it splits your world up into cells. So each cell is a separate terrain object with its height map and its flat maps, etc. And you can kind of pin individual cells. So you click which cells you want to load, and then it'll load them up. And then you have this kind of big graph, which is the tool for editing them. This is
going to run extremely slowly.
But
you're playing with fire when you open these nodes because they're so
Our map magic graphs got extremely complicated by the end. So actually making edits to them on the stream no, it's fine. It's just having a think.
Okay.
So I don't think we can make any edits to it.
No, we should not do that.
No, we shouldn't try. But you get a sense just from this portion of the graph that it's a bunch of different nodes, and each of these is for randomly placing a couple of trees, or you can do things like apply a different color, a different layer, texture layer, like a rock or sand or cliffs, to different parts of the terrain. So where it's really steep, you've got a steep wall, you might want it to be colored like a cliff, that sort of thing.
So here's an example. So most of this biome is like this. It's like rocks. And we kind of have different biomes with different characteristics. So we'll have different distributions of kind of foliage, we'll have different distributions of rocks, and different scales, etc. But within those, we also have these kind of clusters. So we use those clusters to create kind of mini biomes within biomes. And if this camera will rotate, then I can show you the other one that we have here, which is like a little palm forest within the Western Dunes. Apparently it's not going to be very friendly with me. I mean, it might be easier to just show you in the game, but it's an example where we can use like a node graph within MapMagick to then distribute a kind of a sub-biome.
And so the real trick with MapMagick is sort of combining the procedural generation with your authored content. So for any given layer in MapMagick, you can input it just some Perlin noise, just some bumps if you want to just have some little bumps or something. But you can hand edit sort of masks, which you can then feed into it. So for each of the areas of the world, so each of the biomes within the biome, the height map is procedural, but the borders of the biomes and where on the map those biomes live, that's something that we author. So we've got a bunch of, you can find them in, if you go to the MapMagick editor.
This is going to take a while.
No, it should be okay. If you open the editor, so it's these here. So if you click on one, So down here we've got a whole bunch of textures, and these are just black and white textures that were drawn by hand on the iPad. And so this one here, maybe you can increase the size of the preview, but you can undock it if you.
Here.
No, the three dots. Yeah, floating window. There we go. So this texture, the whole texture represents the entire world map, and then the white patch, that's Hakoa. So that's the biome in the southwest corner of the map. And this was just, I mean, you can even see just looking at this was very clearly drawn by hand, and the edges of it were just smudged with a Procreate manually.
But that works fine, right? It doesn't have to be like perfect.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, exactly.
So gestures.
So this is not a particularly high res texture, and it represents the entire world map. But obviously because it's just a sort of blob, it doesn't need to be that detailed. And if your smudging isn't perfect, then the player's not really going to notice.
And this one texture is speaking to one biome, right? Like, and then you'll have a different mask for each biome, and they just are laid over each other, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this folder here, I think this is the final set of masks.
Yeah.
But you can, and so each of these was just, there's a PSD on the iPad, which just has all of these in, it's just a PSD with a layer for each biome. And then we were just exporting those layers as PNGs, and then those get fed into MapMagick. And
so the biome is generated, and then you kind of design around that biome, right? So you're kind of given a result of the landscape of the world. You have a bit of control, but you kind of wanted to relinquish a bit of that control as well, right? You want to
exactly
be random so that you could build within that.
Yeah. So like when I was studying architecture, a lot of the times when you design something, you're given a context, you're given a site, you're given a client, you're given there's a lot of things that you can pull from. And design kind of comes from limitations, it comes from context. So if we're designing a building in this place, it has to respond to what's around it. It has to respond to the temperature or whatever. And when you make a video game, you don't have any of that. You just have this infinite blank space. And it's kind of like the white page problem where as an artist, or as a writer, a lot of people suffer from just like that issue where they're staring at a blank page and they don't know how to get started. And sometimes you just need some context to get started and to produce something. And it was a really useful tool for producing landscape context. It doesn't mean that you still didn't have that issue in some of the biomes instances, but we definitely had more biome ideas than we got in the game. I think we probably had like a ridiculous amount. I think we probably had like 13 or 14 at some point, and we ended up with 6. It's really like, so using that, you can then find a site in the world, and the way this June flows into this thing, like it creates these nice moments, some accidental, some are opportunities, some are like, and you kind of like go with that, and I think it's a really useful process as a designer.
And that's that mindset is built into the way that we actually build the content in the game as well. So this terrain, it doesn't exist in a scene. I mean, there is a scene that holds the map magic object, but the data is just some data. It just describes the whole world, and the terrain doesn't live in any scene. And then each of the individual locations in the game, so that tower that Greg showed us earlier, the town, all of the camps, each of those is just a single scene. And it means that once we've kind of built out the whole world and we're happy with it, and we've kind of locked down all of the biomes, it meant that we could sort of start moving the scenes around. It meant that we weren't, you could just kind of make all of the prototypes of the scenes, do little pro builder blockouts of them, and then we can just kind of quickly move those around and put them in different places and try that out. And keeping those two things separate, it meant that, what we were saying earlier with Wind Waker and it being like an ocean with islands, sort of each of the scenes is like its own little island.
And then the chums, we kind of designed the chums to be this thing that we could hunt for, like little interesting kind of accidental spaces that were
chums
created.
are like the main sort of collectible in the game. Things that,
and they're super modular. You can just drop one wherever you want, and in chests and stuff like that. And so you create these.
Those have got to live. They've got to live in a scene. They have to live somewhere.
Yeah, of course. But if you find a space in the map magic that is interesting, you're like, oh, this sequence is really nice. Like maybe I should use that and put something there.
Yeah, there's a particular swoop of dunes that feels really evocative, and then
I love that this process allows you to have the experience of the explorer as well as the player, like before the player does, right? It's not obvious as you're like, you could like generate this and then get on the hover bike and glide through it for the first time yourself rather than building it and then gliding through it. I have a million more questions about map magic, but in the interest of time, I really want to dive into the art of Sable. And I would love to start looking at the shader and the way you've pulled that off, and maybe look at some of the visual effects. And I know you have a debug view to show us as well, but first maybe we can look at the base shader for Sable. The thing that everybody was like raving about, like what really makes this game pop is the aesthetic.
Sure.
Site at least.
Should we load? We can load the actual game and run through the debug.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if you want to take a look at the actual shader in just the inspector and what kind of controls we have for it. Because,
love to see that.
There really aren't that many shaders in the game. We've kind of got there's the opaque shader. Maybe just load up the tutorial camp or something. That's my kind of go-to.
Okay.
Roundabout scene. So the main shader is just the kind of the opaque shader. It has a bunch of different options on it. Let's get that in there. And in terms of what it actually does, it's kind of just your standard toon shader. It's got toon lighting on it, flat colors. It only really, so the actual outlines themselves, that's all a screen space effect. So that's a effect that's done on the camera. So yeah, for any one of these, we have. So this is the custom toon. And the inspector for this is pretty big because it's got a whole load of options.
Yeah, we can open it up a bit just so we can maybe close the Pro Builder scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, if you take a look at this this staircase, like the handrail on the staircase, you see it has this kind of speckling on it.
Yeah.
So all of the objects in the scene, in view here, they're all using the same shader, but some of them they get their colors from textures. Some of them are just kind of flat shaded with just the tint of the material. But so the brickwork in the background there, that's an actual texture.
Yeah. Let me find. So that's this one.
That's this one here, and yeah, it's just a brick. It's just a brick texture.
Yeah.
And
then you can see the noise texture is drawing the outlines.
Yeah, so there are kind of two textures to
so if I make that
every
really
material.
Big, you'll see there's no outline.
Also, I think probably the speckling on the rock is a better one to show.
Okay.
So with this
That'll be
dark stone. Yeah. Okay. So we kind of there's so the two textures. There's kind of the color texture, which is just a color. It's just the main texture. It's where the object gets its color from. But then second to that is the noise texture, and the noise texture, it doesn't the color. So the noise textures are just grayscale, and you can see if you look at the texture here, you can see it's just in black and white, speckled effect.
And then we have a tone texture, which
yeah. So sometimes you want the color texture and the noise texture to match up. So with this object, you want there to be these speckles, and then you want the speckles to also have a line around them. So the
Can we full screen the feed? I want the chat to see like
to
our producer, to Bernie. Yeah. You can just full screen this feed. Yeah, perfect. So everyone can see clearly. Okay. Sorry, continue.
But you don't. But for instance, if we were to get rid of the texture in the main slot, so you can see that now, if you look carefully, we still have the lines, but there's no color to them. So the color comes from the main texture, but the lines, the sort of details, the sort of textured detail of the material comes from this secondary texture.
So if I delete that, you'll see the lines will disappear.
Okay.
Yeah. And so this isn't something that takes place in this shader. This is something that takes place in screen space. So this is probably the point where it's best to just run the game.
Okay.
Quicker to run the game than it is to start up play mode.
Yeah. We can show how this all works.
But yeah, the kind of the key technique for how we do all of our effects is we use multiple render targets. So what that means is normally where most shaders you just have one render texture, which is just the screen. It's just what's going to be visible on the screen. And all of your shaders, they're just coloring in the pixels on that render texture directly. What we do instead with multiple render targets is your camera is like it's got multiple, it does have multiple render textures. And each of the shaders, it outputs a different color to each of them. And so what we kind of have, if you open up there, let's do debug mode. What's the debug mode?
I forget what the.
Go here, let's have a look.
Whoops. There.
Yeah. Oh no.
It's closing. Okay.
Render something.
Maybe we got rid of it. With the new.
Maybe you're just missing the question mark. You've just got to really.
No,
damn.
It's just closing it. Okay. Well, this used to be in there, but.
Okay, so let's go back to the editor. We can show you this without going into play mode, actually.
I want to be careful about closing this because I'm scared of closing the stream and then disappearing off stream for you.
Well, okay, yeah. So, let's point the camera at something.
Yeah. Let me load the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then let me close this. Sorry. Okay.
Maybe it's cam debug mode or something.
Yeah.
Did you try that one?
I didn't, but
whatever.
we're here now.
Okay, so anyway, so you need to go to the game view for this one because this is something that comes from the camera. Okay, so this is the final view, and then on the actual camera on the edge. Oh no, you know what?
It's changed, hasn't it?
Okay, so basically, for the entirety of this project, we were just using the built-in render pipeline, and all of our effects were just components on the camera. And then about 2 months before we shipped the game, one of the programmers at the porting studio, he migrated the entire project over to scriptable render pipeline. And I have absolutely no idea how that stuff works. So it's quite possible that he's actually stripped that out. I'm trying to think, what's a good way to show this? Let me open up.
Do you have an old build?
Do you have an old? Yeah, I've probably got old builds on here.
Yeah, if we find an older build, we can show. It's just it's the same ideas. Just the details are slightly different.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like a lot of different layerings of edges, basically. So another example, Daniel was talking about the textures initially, but you can see as well, there's stuff that doesn't exist in the textures, stuff that exists in the models. And so when you're modeling something, you have to kind of, and I showed it a bit earlier where I was vertex painting an object. We use vertex painting to create lines. So here's another example on this handrail, or on the stairs. In fact, the stairs are a better example because we get this kind of consistent.
Move the light so that you can maybe put it in. Yeah, there we go.
So you can see that the lines. Well, you can see actually there's one that's been missed here. So this step here hasn't been vertex painted.
Yeah.
So that's why a line it's become this like solid object, whereas these other ones have. And so by doing that, it means basically that you get a really consistent line being drawn around each step. It's quite a manual process. It's quite kind of laborious in a way.
Right.
We had some automations on it initially, but it wasn't really producing the desired results. But yeah, if I turn off all the other outlines, you can kind of see it just in its pure like just vertex line effect. And so that's another layer that we have available to us on top of the texturing. So it's basically a layering of lots of different visual effects.
So that's a script that's part of the shader, right? Or is that like on the object, or is that on the material?
So it's I really wish we had this debug view so that I could show you. Trying to think what's a good way to show it. So if you maybe make yourself a pro builder object.
Okay.
Let's actually just paint a pro builder object.
Yeah. I've got rid of all my pro builder stuff. Give me a second. Okay. So we'll make a new pro builder object. So this is with the default Unity material. We now have a system where it will paint something just error pink if it has that default shader, because we don't want that shader in our project. Here it is with a version of the pro builder material that we've got our custom shader on. And then actually this might be a bad example, but if I vertex paint this, you can see the different colors. And then if I apply just say another material, say let me use something where monumental stone.
Yeah.
Right. So you can see there's no outline here on this edge, but there is on this edge where I vertex painted it, and on this top edge. So if I wanted to add a line coming down here, I would just paint this edge a new vertex color. Let me click on it. And now when I click away, you'll see there's a new line there. So because there's a difference between them.
So basically all of our meshes in the game, their vertex colors are just crazy. They're just all of these like patches of random vertex colors. And there used to be a debug view where you could actually just see what the game looks like. where it's just showing the vertex colors, and it's just a mess. It's just like vomit of colors all over the place.
Right.
And basically the edge detection. So normally with edge detection, kind of traditional edge detection, it's sort of screen space edge detection. They're looking at differences in like the depth of objects. So it's like where there's an object that's far away and then an object in front of it, it's kind of looking at the depth of those two things. And when there's a really big gap between them, it's like, oh, okay, so they're separate objects, and it draws a line between them. And we kind of took that sort of algorithm, but instead of applying it to things like differences in depth or differences in normal values, so you also sometimes you'll have that it's looking at normals, and so where one pixel is on a edge pointing this way and then another pixel is on an edge pointing this way, it kind of looks at, okay, there's a seam in the normals there, and so it'll draw a line, but it's not very consistent, and we never really got very good results with it. So we apply that edge detection script to this kind of secret second off-screen render texture where all of the vertex colors live. So if you imagine that there's just a sort of second view that all of these objects are rendering into, where like this cube just has a different color on each of the faces, and so the edge detection, instead of looking for differences in depth, it's now looking for differences in color. And because it's just like the top face is pink and the right face is green, it knows that, okay, so these pixels here on the edge, those are where there's a difference in colors, and so that's where we draw our lines.
And the same is applied to the more organic shapes, like the hills and all of that?
Yeah, pretty much. We also do have lines based on depth, differences in depth. So like sometimes you can see that like trying to think what's a good object that does this. Okay, so if you look at the handrail of, oh no, actually that's going to be a different vertex color. For the most part, it's just done like this, and so basically all of our meshes, someone has to go through and just paint the vertex colors on everything.
So that must take a while, right? To just jump in and like do that manually, or?
Yeah, it does take a bit of time. Before we had the scriptable render stuff, you couldn't see the outlines in the scene view.
This is like literally since launch, this is a new feature. So before, when designing something, this was actually a really tricky part of the workflow, was you would have to sit with the game view kind of side by side. And so you'd be like snapping this around, okay, looks like that, and then you'd be moving this around and then being like, okay, how does it look from, and it was basically just got very good at like intuiting roughly what it would look like. So this is kind of a new thing that got added, but did you show the rock?
No, so that's the opaque shader, and probably maybe
we have a transparent shader that does
70% of all the objects in the game use that opaque shader. So all of these characters are using it, all of the props are using it. The other main shader that we're using is this rock shader. So there's a lot of rocks in our game.
Yeah.
And the problem that we had for a really long time was all of the textures for the rocks were painted by hand, and getting those to sort of tile nicely and getting them to intersect with each other nicely was impossible, and they always just looked really messy and like someone had tried to slap a texture on these things.
Especially because we were kind of using the same assets and scaling them and stuff.
And we were using the same assets and just kind of
the UVs would scale
and drag all of the rocks around. And so what we have now instead is all of the rocks use. This is also the rock texture is also done procedurally. So if you look at this thing, you can see that when you rotate,
it's more in world space kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that people blend.
Yeah, exactly. So all of the rocks, there's no textures on any of the rocks. They're all just 3D noise in world space. And so it means that like if you, and we've just got a whole bunch of sliders for, so this is the rock shader. we've got quite a few materials for the different biomes, and you're kind of just scaling noise. You
can make them look really ugly if you want.
Yeah. But the idea with these is that means that then if you just duplicate this object, say you want to make a cluster of rocks that are kind of intersecting each other or whatever.
I can't imagine how many months this saves. Months of work hours. Yeah, that's incredible. I would love to look at some other effects in the game as well. Can we look at maybe the dust effect, the VFX that comes out of the hover bike, or the smoke effects that come out of flames?
So dust effects. Let me think about the best way to show this. So a lot of the things that we do with all the textures, really, apart from the one we just showed you, the procedural rock texture, actually hand-drawn on the iPad, a big part of what we wanted to do was have this very 2D feeling, handcrafted style. So most of those textures are literally drawn on the iPad, and then UVs are done. And another thing that we wanted to do was have some of the VFX use a similar system. So I'm just thinking what the best way to show this is. So we've got the hover bike.
The hover bike doesn't actually use it though, does it?
No, it spawns it in. Okay, this is going to take a little. I'm going to skip terrain loading. I guess I can really reduce the draw distance and make this load in.
You've got to make sure you're not falling into space.
We're probably going to load in Ecria there. So let me not. I won't load this scene in a moment, but sorry, let me just find myself. Okay.
You were mentioning using the iPad, and the chat was asking which app to use with it.
Procreate. So I really love it. It's there are limitations, doing gradients I find really annoying. I don't really know what if anyone has a good solution for gradients in Procreate, please send it to me. But has some really nice features. Tiling is actually also kind of annoying, but symmetry features are really good. Just giving you that sense of hand-drawn feeling is I think it does that really powerfully, and I really like what it does there. And iterating on something and just being able to bring it back and forth, and you can even take it into Photoshop if you need to do that, which sometimes I'll need to do. But the key art that we did later on in the project, I did in Procreate. The vinyl art that I drew for Japanese Breakfast soundtrack, I did in Procreate. So it's a really powerful app. I really like it. I think it's just the flexibility of the iPad. I do have a Cintiq that I used to use, but I just hated being tethered to the computer, and the iPad just has such good response rate. It feels really the closest thing I've ever used to drawing on paper. So yeah, I really can't praise it highly enough. I think it was one of the single best investments we made on the project. Just Procreate's 20 quid or something, so really got our money's worth, whereas Adobe were paying subscription. God, yeah, we should stop that. But it's a lot of money. So I really like it. You can do a lot with it. A lot of the philosophy behind even the assets, 3D assets, was introducing this hand-drawn feel. So we'd kind of wiggle around the vertexes to give it a really rough up an edge. So it's not just this perfectly straight edge the whole time. It has a little bit of waviness to it. And the same was true with textures. So even where there was something that was meant to be a straight line, I'd kind of just draw it by hand, so that there's even just a very subtle wiggle or whatever, and give it a bit a kind of thumbprint feeling.
Yeah.
I found the particles.
You found the particles there.
I found the prefab. Sorry, our naming system is atrocious. So actually trying to find.
Well, I've got them here as well, and I'm just loading the scene so I can show them in practice. But basically,
I would love to see them in the inspector as well, and like just how they're.
Yeah, the inspector setup for the particles, I think, is a really nice one.
So we spawn the particles in different positions per bike part. So different bike parts create different kind of spawn points.
They look like they're broken here, or you just
June particles.
There we go.
So you can see they kind of dissipate. Actually, these ones, do I do it on these ones?
I think you probably do, but
the best examples are, there are some like dust particles out in the dunes, which maybe aren't here actually. You've got them running there, so maybe if we can switch over to Daniel's laptop, you can have a better view of how that stuff works. But it is like a hand.
So we'll swap to Dan's screen share.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No. It's
okay. So.
So this is not it, right?
You get to see the game with a really short draw distance and how it would feel if you
had to play Sable entirely in the editor.
Yeah, that's let me.
Can you see my
so
screen?
Are we on the right screen share, or is this the?
No, this.
Oh
is
no,
the
so we'll swap to the other
this
screen share, Bernie. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the particle system. So this is just a kind of dust particle system. This gets used when you're out in the dunes. And Greg, maybe you want. I didn't actually make this.
No, so
explain how it's done.
So yeah, I mean, it's just a particle system. Like, I love particle systems. We've used them the entire time. Like, I just think it's a great system for artists. It always adds a bit of life to whatever you're making, right? Like, even if you just got like a sand particle. And so all that's happening here, you see we've got some like subtle gravity modifiers, try and give it a bit of randomness. We have color coming in here, and then we have like emission on cycles, and we have like randomized probability of emission. Again, I tried to introduce like a bit of randomness to things to just give it a more organic feeling. And then size over lifetime.
Also,
but the main thing
is the renderer.
It's a texture sheet animation and the renderer. So, or maybe you can see it more here. So you can see it's just a sprite sheet, and I've hand drawn this sprite sheet here, and so it's just sliced up, and then I've using the particle system, I'm basically using a texture sheet animation, and then I've got a frame over time, and I'm randomizing that, and then you can see, well, again, this is the random firing off effect. It's not firing, but when it does, you can see it like dissipates over time, over lifetime, and that effect, it again trying to introduce that hand-drawn feeling to the animation.
So it's just like a flip book of sprites, but in 3D.
Yeah. Okay. I do the same we have a lightning effect in the Black Desert, and I did the lightning effect is hand drawn on the iPad as well. Again, it's just like a texture sheet that I'm flicking through. And,
I was wondering how, when these particles spawn into each other, you don't actually get an outline where the meshes intersect, right?
No,
Only on the boundary. So I was wondering how that was achieved as well.
Well, so that's because the meshes.
The vertex colors.
Yeah, so the mesh that we're using for particle rendering, which is just this
wobbly mesh,
wobbly sphere. It's all one vertex color, so it's all just a solid vertex color. And so when you've got 10 of these particles all intersecting with each other, because all of the meshes, because they're all the same mesh, they all just have the same vertex color as each other, which means that as far as the edge detection is concerned, it's one object.
Same principle as everything else then. Yeah.
Yes. So that's how actually, if you switch over to my screen, there's a perfect example on there right now. I've just loaded up. Sorry.
Yes.
So you can see this smoke effect. So I think that's just a series of just circular sprites just overlapping each other, and then we're just using a velocity of lifetime or something. We're just tweaking that.
A bit of curl noise.
Yeah, exactly.
And this one's 2D, whereas the other one was 3D.
Yeah,
right?
so this is actually just a billboarding sprite.
Yeah,
it's just a circle sprite.
And part of the reason we wanted to do that was because of efficiency.
There was a time several years
3D.
ago when that smoke effect was just spheres, actual 3D spheres, and for a long time that particle system was using up something like 3 million tries. Like each instance of it was about 3 million tries.
Oh my god!
Which was something like 60% of all of the tries on the screen were just that smoke. But when we changed it to just being billboarded quads, it looked fine. It looked pretty good. Obviously, we have quite a simple flat style, and so
I'm gonna no clip my way to the. Don't try this at home. So I'm gonna no clip my way to this like lightning VFX that we have, and again, this one is hand drawn. Well, it's a combination, right? So I use so these ones are actually just using trail renderers and noise, and then
the particle system.
Yes, in the particle system. And then when the cloud builds up, and this is all sequenced using timeline, by the way, there's this effect where it comes down, and that effect is the hand drawn one. It's like a split second, but it's
that's fascinating. So you have like a particle effect that's sequenced so that things happen in order on timeline. That's on loop. That's just always there.
Yeah, and then the loops are script. There's a script, and that script is randomized. And then the timeline plays, and the timeline is a regular sequence, and so that's how we did that.
That's great. A lot of people think about timeline as like something for cutscenes, but sorry, go ahead.
No, we use that for quite a lot of just wherever there's a place where we need to sequence a couple of different particle systems. Maybe we need some audio as well to line up with a particle, the lightning striking or that sort of thing.
I'll see if I can find that timeline.
We use timeline for a bunch of things. I mean, the entire
I might not like it.
The cycle of the sun moving across the sky and the directional light turning. That's just a timeline as well. That's just always looping, and there's a script that just ticks that timeline along.
Here's the timeline for these rocks. So it's just started up. You might not be able to actually see the particle. Yeah, you can't see particle systems in the Insta view. I don't know which rock I'm picking, but you can see the timeline playing here. I think it was, this rock. Yeah, so. It's pretty cool, and like we can sequence sound using that. We can, I think the flash effect on the screen is using time, which actually is a bug. It's causing it's not a bug, but it's what people think is a bug. So we need to sort that out. But it's a really useful tool.
Like you can see on here that there's 5 different particle tracks on this timeline because there's a whole bunch of different particle systems going on.
Yeah, so the clouds, the build-up of the clouds, that's another system, and then the like static electric effect, and then the lightning strike. And because it's sequenced, you can seed it, so you can just have it like, this is a particle system, but I want to be in control of it, so I want it to look a specific way, so use this one seed of it that looks good.
And the script is like jumping between different seeds to keep it, or
nothing that, to be honest with you, just the different position and rotation and stuff gives it enough variety. But you can actually see this game flow, which is a different asset. This game flow element on the right is what is setting the randomized duration. So you can see there's just a random wait. After that random wait, enable the timeline.
Yeah, so it's just playing the timeline, and now we're just waiting for a bit, and then it'll play the timeline again.
Yeah, so you can see the clouds up there are building up. So the idea there is to communicate to the player like something's about to kick off, and then lightning effects. There's the effect. And then down below, crystals should grow out. Again, part of the timeline.
Nice.
Yeah. And then we have some details at the bottom where like there are like rocks that start floating, like using static effect. I was able to do this complete. I think I kept this secret from you for a while, and then I showed you it. The VFX was iPad and Unity, and that's it really. And then
you just surprised him with it.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's awesome.
Because I always want that first impression. Obviously it was refined after and done. That's a collaborative process, but just as a like initial prototype, this is something that I, as a designer, could do because I have no skills whatsoever in programming. Scripting something like this is not far below the extent of my abilities. I could do a tiny bit more, but not much. GameFlow was a really useful tool alongside scriptable objects.
GameFlow was another asset store thing. I think it's actually not being supported anymore. They stopped supporting it kind of halfway through production, which was kind of a shame. If I'd known that was going to happen, I would have used Bolt.
Yeah.
But, I guess we can use Bolt in the next one.
Yeah. Bolt, which is now like Unity's main visual scripting solution.
But this one is quite nice. It's just a little. The nice thing about GameFlow was that all of the logic just goes in the inspector, so it's just kind of components that little blocks that you can just add to the inspector, which I quite liked. But
all the chums are timelines.
Yes. So when you open a chest, and we use a timeline on it, the chest prefab has a timeline on it.
Yeah.
So that when you open it, we position the camera, and then we'll play a sound effect, and then we'll pop up the dialogue, etc.
So had you not been able to, had timeline not existed, a lot of this workflow and process would probably have to be shared. So you couldn't actually do that, like build this and then show it to Dan later on, right? He'd actually have to code the sequencing for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then he probably would have made the sensible decision not to do it, but told me to fuck off. But what's to say that he can't do shit? No.
Timeline has been really essential for just being able to sequence effects, because so much of our game is just effects, just really nicely done effects. It's also a combination of gameplay timelines where the player still has control and there's no actual cameras in this timeline, and then actual cutscenes where we're taking control away from the player and we're directing the camera, and then it's more like a traditional what you kind of think of as using timeline. So I guess we could show off one of those now.
I was gonna go show the shade one maybe.
Mm-hmm.
What are we showing?
The shade of Equria timeline.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about was some of my workflow, but again using the iPad and Procreate, is just like drawing what do you call it? Storyboards.
Mm-hmm. I would love for us to jump to a quick 2-3 minute break. Come right back and talk about the cutscenes. Just want to give everyone a chance to grab a glass of water, grab a snack. We'll come back and we'll be talking about cutscenes. So we'll see you right after the break.
All right.
See you soon. And we're back. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you got a snack and a drink. We're here with Shedworks, the creators of Sable. We just took a look at some of the great workflows that they had with Timeline. And Dane in chat just asked, I would love for them to share that Timeline script. I've been trying to do that with Timeline for a while, but struggled. And Dan was actually just talking to me about it.
Yeah, so we didn't use an actual script with like a C# script for that. That was just the little visual scripting asset that we had. But all it was doing, it was a little visual scripting component that lives on the playable director, so on the game object that has the timeline on it. And it just plays the timeline, and then it waits for a random amount of time, and then it plays it again. And then it just does that on a loop. So it just plays the timeline, waits for a bit, plays the timeline, waits for a bit. And that's it. It doesn't even think about how long the timeline is. We just kind of...
Yeah, it's as basic as you get, really. It's... But effective, if you just need to be creative about how you use these tools, I guess. Yeah, you should be able to do something. You should be able to do something similar using other visual scripting tools. So like Bolt could probably do that, or Playmaker as well. Yeah.
Cool. So, thanks for the question, Dane. What are we heading to now?
So
this is another timeline.
This is probably the most, not the most complex, but it's one of the more complex timelines that we have in the game. You could probably just hit play in the window
with the ink stuff.
I don't think it breaks.
It'll run now.
Maybe.
It'll literally run now. Okay. Time to show them the shade.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So zoom out so you can see the playhead. The cursor is locked. Oh no, there we go. So
here's the timeline for this cutscene. You can see there's a bunch of events at the top.
Yeah.
So this timeline was actually really cool because it's made. So some of our timelines we'll need custom animations for. We'll need stuff like, this moment is really tightly sequenced. We need Sable to do this or a character to do that. This was an example where I think I just went away and used existing animations in the project to just build a completely fresh cutscene and just like camera setup, camera timing. But here what we're doing is...
So what you can see, so we've just passed a marker in the timeline, so this is a custom marker system that I built on top of the built-in marker system in Timeline. But so you can see that, so we hit that first marker and we opened this dialog box, and this is now just the actual dialog box. The player can kind of cycle through the dialogue. But you can see the timeline is actually still running in the background. And what we do is we have this other marker, which is a bit further down the timeline. And when the playhead hits this second marker, it's a...
So this one here.
It's I call it a jump marker, and you can...
It'll jump back.
Yeah, it's just a system where when the playhead hits a jump marker, we can jump play back to any other marker on the timeline. So you can see the playhead. Yeah. So it means that we've got this kind of looping sequence where the camera is still changing. But you can change the camera, you can have animations going while this dialogue is going. And then as long as the dialogue is going, we're just going to be in this loop. So we're just looping this little section of the timeline so that, because obviously we don't know how long it's going to take for the player to read the dialogue.
Right.
But then part of the feature is that the first marker, the marker that started the dialogue, the system, it's kind of listening out for when the dialogue is complete. And when the dialogue is complete, it jumps to another marker again. So we just have this kind of system for interactive markers where when you reach a certain place in the timeline, so here again we've got a second one, you can just jump somewhere else in the timeline. So yeah, this is just means that, and we can also do things like you can have a jump marker that is tied to a condition. So you can have that if the player has done a certain thing, they've turned on a certain switch or whatever, then when you reach that marker, jump somewhere else in the timeline. And then if they haven't reached that thing, don't do the jump and just keep playing. And so we've got this. It's a bit basic, but it just means that we have the ability to jump around to different places on the timeline based on conditions. And so here we've got another set of markers where we're just looping in this little section of the timeline while we talk to this kid. And then
a shout out to Micah, who I know is watching, our animator on the project. I can see all the messages I've got in Slack on my screen are from him. 100%. I just know.
I think I love how you just jumped into your folder, looked at what animations you had. You had an idea of what cutscene you wanted. You had the storyboard drawn out, looked at the animations you had available, and just put it together.
Yeah, pretty much. Like we have we have a system where we're using our dialogue system to call certain animations. So we have a bunch of like particular animations.
Yeah, you can tag a line of dialogue to play like a gesture on the character. So we had a whole bunch of gesture, just sort of short clips of characters just like shrugging or waving or doing little gestures. We just had a whole load of those in the project anyway because we use them for the dialogue.
So we can remix those and create new cutscenes from those. And then if there's a bespoke one, so like I was just going to show it just before the call, but this was an example where we had storyboard something. This is for the Maskcaster cutscene, and then I'd send Micah these like really rough storyboards, and then he'd go away and make like custom animation for it. So this is where Sable's reaching into the face of the Maskcaster to pull out a mask, and we ended up having to swap the arm around. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, that's a different process to what I could do with just timeline and a bunch of pre-existing animations. And I could so down here you can see I'm blending animations as well in timeline, so you get so it doesn't all look really stilted. But that the kind of like snapping between animations also fits our animation style, which has this like limited frame style. So it's not always terrible if we do just snap an animation. But
so it makes blending easier, actually, right?
Yeah, in some ways,
Spaces in
it
between.
means we can get away with it.
Yeah. There was some problems we had with like physics. So we're using physics. So I don't know if you noticed at the end of that cutscene, the kid runs across the dunes, right? And we're not keyframing every physics step. That's just simulated. So
yeah, that's using the root motion of the animation.
So we had some real problems where so the kid in this cutscene is inside this jail, but there was like a collider over the door. It gets opened, and the kid wasn't reliably leaving the jail or walking out. So we had to have a system where we have like two children body like entities.
There's a duplicate, a hidden duplicate of the child
that is kinematic,
just hidden inside that cell, and it's just turned off and just doesn't have a rigid body, or I think the rigid body is kinematic.
Yes, it's kinematic. So you can see down here, up to this point in the cutscene,
turn it off.
Child is kinematic. Yeah. And then at the end, we need a bit of physics, so we turn them off, switch them over, and then animate the physics based on. So that's a trick, because that was a real nightmare.
Smoke and mirrors.
That was one of working with physics is one of the most fiddly parts of timeline, because obviously you can author your timelines in play mode, but it's a bit cumbersome. And so most of the time when you're authoring it, you're authoring in edit mode. And so obviously the physics system isn't simulating when you're in edit mode. So if you want to have a character walking up a hill in edit mode, there's no root motion. They just walk forward and they walk straight through the hill. And yeah, for a long time we were kind of stuck on how do we deal with that. I think a lot of the time you kind of just have to author it, just imagining that the character would actually be about 10 units higher than they actually are. And it was a bit fiddly, but yeah. In the end, this system of just having
smoke and mirrors, the better. And also the benefit that having it kinematic gave us was that you don't then have to animate it 10 units above, so you can have your cameras where they should be, you can have your characters where they should be, and so when you run it in editor, you can actually see a more accurate representation of what you're going to end up with. Whereas when we were relying on physics, okay, I set this character up, but they're like the physics is simulating them, so they're like 0.2 of a unit down, but my camera is pointing 0.2 of a unit now too high, so I have to, and it was really like. And
Cinemachine obviously, Cinemachine obviously helps alleviate that a little bit, because you can, if you give your cameras a look at, it means that it's looking at the right target and can help keep your objects in frame. But there's no getting around the fact that they're supposed to be animating physics. But yeah, so this was our horrible hack. It's just there's a whole load of duplicate characters that just don't have any physics on them, and we just swap them out.
Have to make it work somehow, and you did just that.
This is the cleanest way we found.
Yeah. I think there's one more topic for us to dive into, and that's so many developers' favorite topics. Whenever I bring this up, people's eyes light up, and that's scriptable objects. Dan, I know you use scriptable objects heavily throughout this project. Could you, maybe for people who are unaware, maybe quickly just give us like a brief description of what scriptable objects are and their core principles and how you use them in your project?
Yeah, of course. Big fan of scriptable objects. I think all programmers, Unity programmers, are big fans of scriptable objects.
So do we want to switch to your
we can switch over to my screen.
Let's switch to Dan's screen, Bernie.
So the way to think about scriptable objects is, so when you think about regular objects, just game objects, they live in a scene, they're in the hierarchy, they exist in space, they have transforms. And for a game like us, where it's open world and we can't fit the whole game in a handful of scenes, our game has maybe 70 or 80 scenes spread out across the whole map. We have this problem where, for instance, there's a quest in the game where the player, we have the town here, which is in its own scene, and there's a quest in the game where the power to the town has gone out, and you have to kind of fix the power station to get the power to come back on. And the power station, which is over there in the distance, this is the power station. This is in a different scene, and so when you've got game objects that live in different scenes in your game, but you want them to relate to each other in certain ways, in any way. So the player goes into the chamber inside the thing, and they press the button in the power station, and they fix the power. And then we want the player's actions in the power station scene to be picked up and reflected by the town scene. And so you run into this problem where your game objects exist in different scenes and they have no way to talk to each other. They can't reference each other. You can't drag an object from one scene into the inspector of another. So this problem of, so how do you get your scenes to talk to each other? Scriptable objects is a really useful way of doing this. So scriptable objects, they're like regular scripts, they're like components that you would put on an object in a scene, except they don't exist on game objects, they just live in your project folder, and they just have a bunch of data on them. We have loads of scriptable objects in our game. I mean, most of the kind of core systems are scriptable objects. So the object that handles all of the streaming in the game, that's just the streaming manager. So it's a great way to do things like singletons, where you've got like this one big class that this is the script that you want to do all of your streaming, or this is the script that you want to handle all of your audio or whatever. You might make a big. So this is our streaming manager, for instance. This is the object that's in charge of loading the terrain and in charge of loading the scenes. And this is just a scriptable object that It doesn't exist in any scene because it's the one that loads the scenes, so it's got to exist before the scenes do. But so the way that we structure all of the data in our game, all of the variables, all of the things that the player can do, we have a scriptable object for every single variable in the game. So this comes from this pattern comes from a very famous Unite talk from 2017 by, I think his name was Brian Hipple, or I think there were two actually. I don't know if he did the first one or if he did there were kind of two key scriptable object Unite talks where he talks about, so scriptable objects are really nice if you've got your sort of big meaty streaming class that doesn't live in a scene, but they're also really nice when you just want to have like little pieces of data. So the variable of the power being fixed in the power station, that doesn't belong to the power station and it doesn't belong to the town. It belongs to both. They both need to, it doesn't belong to anything, but both of those need to know about it. So what we do is we take that variable and we make a little scriptable object out of it. So down here in the project folder, this is all of our, so we've got this folder here. This is the sort of runtime data folder. And these are all of, basically got a folder for each of the locations in the game. And then, let's see, where's our, so here's the 2010 one, Atomic Heart Quest. So here we have a whole bunch of little scriptable objects related to the quest where you fix the power. So like, Power on, Atomic Heart Power on. So this here, this game object, this scriptable object, sorry, this represents the power fixed variable. So any scene in the whole game that wants to know whether or not the player has fixed the power, they go and they take a look at this scriptable object, and it's just got one value in its inspector, and that's just this ball. Is it ticked or not? Have we done it? And so,
and then as a designer, I can use that ball to tell me things about the state of how the town should be. So I can design the town, and we have like, when you first arrive at the town, the colors are like really gray, really dusty. It's meant to feel like totally switched off. And then the second time you come back to the town after we've hit this scriptable object, we turn the power on, the colors are much more vibrant. The nighttime's a lot brighter. We have like lights that come on, and they're all, every single component there is referencing this scriptable object. So
like for instance, here in the scene for the town, we've got this game object here, which has got so this is the ball value listener component that we've made. So you can see it's got a reference to so this is the Atomic Heart Power On variable, which lives in the assets folder. And you just put the ball value listener on it, and then you drag the scriptable object into the slot. And then we have this callback here, which is just a Unity event. And you can do whatever you want with that variable. So the idea is that whenever this variable gets changed in some way, whenever it gets turned true or false, we can invoke this callback here, and we can do a whole bunch of stuff. So what we're doing on this one is we're taking this bunch of crowd NPCs in the courtyard here, and we're just turning them off. So
that's part of a cutscene that you get the first time.
Yeah. So the idea is that when the power is fixed, when the power is broken, all of these people are crowding around in the courtyard because they want to know what's going on. And then once you fix the power and you come back, these people have dissipated because the power is fixed and they've gone back to their lives. But if we wanted to do a whole bunch of other stuff when the power comes on, I mean, that's super easy. We can just add more things to, we could also have that we want to turn some other game objects on, or we want to change the lighting in some way, or we want to set a parameter on an animator. So for instance,
the power pipe is a great analogy for like what scriptable objects actually do in allowing just connecting different scenes in your project and bringing things together.
The window asset. That's a nice brief. So basically we have this window asset, which is a prefab, and I used a game flow script on this it might be on child. I don't
looking
know.
here.
Yeah.
So this is the window. So this is, you just put one of these in the wall of the building in the scene. And Greg put a little.
Did a little game flow script. Again, like I'm not a programmer whatsoever. Like I don't even know I hope the script works, but
It does.
Yeah.
But so it's got a ball value listener again. It's listening to this power on variable, and then it's just got a callback. And what's it doing?
It enables the script.
So it's turning on. It's just enabling this other component here, which is disabled by default. And so that means that when the power on is false, this component over here is false, and then when the power on becomes true, that component becomes true, and then that script starts doing whatever it does. So it means that.
And what is it doing?
So that one is you see the black behind the So at night, if the power is on, it will turn that into a light. So it like looks like people are inhabiting the space,
That's
but only
so great.
if the power is on.
Yeah.
So it's just like really subtle stuff, but it's done in a prefab. So then it applies across, right?
So the crowd, the windows.
It's just flipping. It's just saying if the power is on, we're playing this little game flow block, which is just a little bit of visual scripting that Greg made, which is just it's at certain times of day, which is what this time of day script is about.
Between 8 and 7.
Yeah. It's just swapping the material. So it's instead of using this like black material, it will just switch to kind of emissive orange material, and then it looks like the light is on inside this window.
Yeah.
And there's a whole load of objects in this scene that are referencing that power on object. So
the windmills.
These windmills over here. What they do is.
Actually, did I make those independent? No.
So these have also got a wall value listener, and they're also listening to the power on. Yeah. And all they're doing is, if the power is turned on, we're enabling this component here, which
it just has rotate.
It's just a rotator. So it's just a rotating script. It just spins this thing around an axis.
Yeah.
And so I can even show what that looks like then when the game is actually running, because it means that you can even see it when.
So if the power is off to start with, you'll be able to see that instantly. This obviously the only time in the game this event, the ball turning on, can take place is when you're in the atomic heart. So like we don't have to transition anything. We don't have to worry about like, oh, it's going to just flip from one state to another. So obviously what we're going to show you is not something the player would ever see. So that's like obviously useful to us in terms of like hiding this process, but it'll be a good visual representation of what we're using.
What it means is because all of every single variable in the game, and you saw the folder. Editor's going to take a while to load up now, but you saw the folder that I was showing that had all of the scriptable objects in it. We've got loads. There's like hundreds and hundreds of these things, and every time we have a new thing that we need to keep track of the state of it, whenever we need a new variable for a new place in the world or a new objective or whatever, Greg can just make a new one of those balls, and he just puts it in the folder, and then he can just use it to hook up to animators, to
doors. Like doors is like a big one, right? Like, so if a door becomes unlocked, it enters an unlocked state, we want the player to be able to go through it now where they couldn't before. We track that through a scriptable object, just tick a ball, and then when the player comes back to it, or if they reload the game, it should then be accessible to them going forward. Trying to think of other, but we can use it in more creative ways as well.
So for instance, so we have the
power is off.
Let me float up into the sky so you get a nice view of it. Actually, no, maybe let me just go stand on the shopping street when we turn it on.
So you see the like colors are really like
Yeah, so the colours here are quite washed out. The power is off, things aren't moving, there's nobody on the street. But
it's a debug command.
If I go to the scriptable object that controls the power, I can just go and tick this, and then all of these listeners in the scene, you can see the colours came on. There's people on the street now, new people hanging out. You should be able to see, yeah, look, the windmills started moving.
Yeah, and they were static before.
Yeah.
If you make it nighttime, the lights should start coming on as well. Let's see, fingers crossed, I don't know.
Yeah, look, there's sun.
Yeah.
So we just got a couple of...
So they come on and off at random intervals.
Yeah.
So again, it's giving that sense of life. When you see one come on and see one turn off, it makes you feel like there's someone doing it. Really simple, but
but the fact that you take the time to put these details in, it shows that, like, the amount of love and effort and attention to detail that's put into this really brings this.
But what it also means is that, so for instance, this kind of object over here, this is in a totally different scene to the town. It's quite near the town, but it's in a completely different scene. And so we want to be able to, maybe this one doesn't switch off again if you switch it off.
No, but, it probably isn't reading that, because we never take that state backwards, so we don't have to bother in this instance doing that. But
so let me go and find it. So like, the fact that
one was red, right, before.
Yeah. So by default, this like strip on the outside of the power terminal is red, and then because I ticked the power on thing on, this became green. And so there's objects in multiple scenes across the game that needed to know whether or not the power was turned on. And what I have to do is go and tick this thing, and all of the objects in all of the scenes that need to know about it can respond to it. Yeah. And the other important thing is that it's not just that there are objects that are in different scenes that need to know about this. It's that, like, when you turn the power on, the scene for the town might not even be loaded at the moment. Like the scene for the town, because we're streaming different scenes in and out as you move around.
The objects can be disabled.
Yeah, if the scene for the town doesn't exist, it needs to know when you first load the town scene. Then it needs to have a way of like checking whether or not the power has come on. And so, because the scriptable objects, they exist outside of the scenes, it means that it doesn't matter which scenes are loaded or unloaded. The state of all of your variables, it's separate from your scenes. And so, yeah, this is a really, really powerful way of keeping track of all of your data. They don't just have to be balls. We can also have them be floats or integers or whatever. So we've got a couple of different types of data value. And yeah, that's kind of the architecture that underpins pretty much the entire game. Yeah. The combination of those and then the listener components, which live in the scenes that have their Unity events on them. Those mean we can do pretty much anything. We can change animator parameters, we can change materials.
And you can fire them off of timelines. You
can have that, when a ball becomes true, we might want to start playing a timeline. Or we could do the inverse, and we could have that when a timeline finishes playing, we flip a ball.
Yeah.
And then,
it's basically just down to like what you can think of and how you want to use it. Like it was a really... We didn't use it loads, but there's like an example where we had this like water level rising, and we had to track that. And it was really useful in that instance, for example. And we have to reset that. So we also need to track when it goes back, but we need to do that across saves, and we need to do that. So it's like really powerful in that regard. It's a really great system, and it was so useful to us.
And you can see that it's also just the convenience of if I'm working on the town scene and I want to be able to quickly turn the power on, I don't need to load up the the power station scene and then go and turn it on manually and then come back to the town. I can just go and find the scriptable object that's in charge of that, and I can just tick it in the inspector, and then I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Right. You don't even have to be in play mode. It gets saved, right? Even if you're not in play mode. Yeah.
Well, so scriptable objects, their state does get saved when you exit play mode. We actually found that was really annoying to have that you'd have to go and
undo your changes. Again. Yeah.
So we actually do our data value objects. They actually reset themselves back to their default value when you stop the game. So
got it.
But you can, while we're in edit mode, I could like quickly tick this, and then if I play the game, when the game starts, it will start as if this was true. So yeah, big fan. If you don't know if you want to sort of see like the details of how you might go about actually building this, I very strongly recommend going and watching that.
And we posted those in the chat.
Yeah, it's a kind of evergreen talk. It will never be not useful.
If you guys want, I'm posting a blog post that Matt Schell, one of our previous evangelists, wrote about, and it includes all those talks, which are really useful. We hear the both Unite talks reference a lot whenever we bring creator spotlights on. But you guys can go check it out there. Eric Dew said, this is super helpful. I've been architecting something similar, and it's nice to be validated I'm doing it in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And Epic Wing Dude said, right, when working alone, it's hard to know if what you're doing is right. So thanks for the helpful information.
No problem.
Nice. So I think that's it for now. We covered a lot. So thanks for staying on a little bit longer to show us more. I think there's tons of other questions we can have, but we'll bring you back for other dev talks in the future while you're bringing stuff together for Sable and launching some new updates for it. We love that you're going to do some more accessibility things like the lines. I think a lot of people were mentioning that. Really excited that people and developers really care about that topic, because I really care about that too. So excited to see how that would change in the game. I've seen a lot of other studios that made the aesthetic really a part of the game as well, while making accessibility tools available for everyone. But thanks, everyone. We have a ton of streams next week. We've got Might and Delight. They have their game coming out called Book of Travel. So if you want to come check out a really, really stunning, beautiful game, TMMORPG, come to see us on Wednesday, and we'll have the stream tomorrow. This is going to be on our YouTube channel. I'm going to be hanging out with Lego, and we're going to check out the new Lego Ninjago micro game. So if you want to come win a ton of prizes and see how you can be featured in the Lego store, come see me tomorrow on the YouTube channel. And we also have the Let's Play. So this is our monthly Let's Play. Hassan and I play through a bunch of your games. Make sure you submit anything that you're working on. You'll get a chance to be featured on the stream. But yeah, thanks, Greg and Dan.
Thank you so much.
No,
any final shout outs? Is there anything you want to drive people to?
Maybe someone on the team.
Buy the game.
Yes.
No, I mean, no, thank you so much for watching, I guess. I mean, the fact that anyone's interested is a compliment. And yeah, the game is big. Like, we obviously have a lot to show, but we're glad to be able to share something with you today.
Nice. I think it was great also to hear you talk about like all of your physical world references. Somebody in chat earlier said they were in a Barnes & Noble's and they saw a magazine with Sable on it. And I think that's the true way to enjoy some of that beautiful art. So I think that's like a nice little career primer there.
If it was the Edge one, again, I drew that cover on Procreate on an iPad. So
nice.
It's all like, yeah.
Awesome.
It comes back around, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to throw a bunch of links in chat. Stick around. We're going to raid someone else. But thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.